الحمد لله وحده الصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعد نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اقتفى أثره واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد, فإنشاءالlah we'll continue with reading from the book known as Iqtidaa us-Siraat-il-Mustaqeem لمخالفة أصحاب الجحيم. The straight path necessitates being different from the people of al-Jahim, as was written by Abu al-Abbas Ahmed ibn Abdul Halim ibn Abdul Salam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, who died in the year 728 after the Hijrah. And we've reached the section where the author rahimahullah ta'ala is discussing some of the qualities of the Maghdub alayhim and the Nasara and the Romans and the Persians that the Muslims have fallen into. Some of the qualities that the people of the hellfire were described with. Some of the qualities that the people of the hellfire were described with that unfortunately the believers, the Muslims, have fallen into them as well. And the author is mentioning these qualities so that we can recognize them in ourselves and thus take precautions from them. Because if not, like he mentioned, Allah Azza wa Jal has told us that there's going to be from this ummah a group of people who resemble those who came before us, down to the smallest detail. So that's going to happen without any escape, that there will be some of us who resemble them. But the author is mentioning these qualities so that the labib, that the person with sense and intellect, can know what they are to take precautions from them. So far from the qualities that we mentioned, and we mentioned that all of these qualities in general are criticizable in themselves. In general, they're bad qualities to begin with. But then when you add to that what comes in those qualities from resembling the Jews and the Christians and the Persians and the Romans, then that adds an even greater level of criticism to the quality. And if you weren't aware that this quality was criticizable just by its nature, then the simple fact that you know it was something that these people were described with would be a sufficient of enough of an evidence to make it recognizable as such, i.e. that it is a blameworthy quality. So the first quality the author mentioned was al-hasad. He mentioned jealousy. From the qualities of the people of the book, the Jews specifically, is that they are jealous. And he mentioned likewise al-ikhtiyal or al-ikhtiyal wal-fukhur, this arrogance and pridefulness. He mentioned those qualities. Likewise, he mentioned stinginess with wealth, but even more specifically, stinginess with knowledge and the concealing of information to hold another people down or to advance one's own position or to accomplish some benefit out of the dunya. Likewise, the author, he mentioned a unfairness and a lack of sincerity in their devotion. How the people of the book, specifically the Jews, when it's told to them to follow the haqq, they reject it when it's not from their group, while at the same time not doing all of the things that are necessary upon them in the group that they claim affiliation with. So they reject the information, the truth that comes to them from outside of their circle, while at the same point in time, they don't follow the truth that their circle has, that is incumbent upon them. And like this, he mentioned also from their disregard of others, and how some of the Muslims have fallen into this as well, how certain groups and factions disregard that which the others have from aspects of truth and correctness with them. Likewise, from the qualities that he criticized from the Jews was their distortion of the book. يُحَرِّفُونَ الْكَلَمَ عَنْ مَوَاضِعِهِ. They distort the book or the statements from their proper places, and their deviated interpretation, whether it be their distortion of the actual words or their distortion of the meaning, and whether that distortion of the meaning be through improper interpretation or other than that, right? Tahrif with ta'wil and all of those things. And we mentioned how some of the Muslims have fallen into that, whether it is distortion of the words by fabricating hadith or purposely misreading ayat. Likewise, a distortion of the meaning by interpreting meanings and interpreting beliefs incorrectly. And those were the qualities that he mentioned as it related to the maghdub alayhim, those that had the curse of Allah upon them. And then the author began to talk about the Nasara and what were some of the qualities that were criticizable that the Nasara were well known for, that some of the Muslims have fallen into. From the most obvious of them is al-ghulu, extremism, right? Al-ghulu, being past the boundaries in their worship and in their religion. And this goes back to innovation and goes back to deification of individuals. It goes back to extremism and how one worships. All of these things, you find a lot of the Muslims have fallen into it, whether it be ghulu in personalities, how they deify Hassan and Hussein, or how they deify their shuyukh on their tariqah, etc. Or it could be extremism in how they worship, how they practice the worship that they're supposed to do. وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلَصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ. And they were not commanded with anything other than worshiping Allah sincere in His religion. And we talked about the difference between al-hulul and al-ittihad, two things merging together or two things becoming one in the aqidah of the Christians, and how some of the Muslims have adopted this. And then the last thing we talked about was their taking of their leaders as gods besides Allah and lords besides Allah. وَاتَّخَذُوا أَحْبَارَهُمْ وَرُهْبَانَهُمْ أَرْبَابًا مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ. And how this was an aspect of shirk of those people, that they would put their leaders over what Allah and His Messenger said. And we find this nowadays occurring from some of the Muslims, how they put their leaders over the Quran and the Sunnah. وَيُقَدِّمُ بَيْنَ يَدَيْ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. And they proceed in front of Allah and His Messenger. And when they are told to go back to Allah and His Messenger, you find them not submitting to that. Today the author is going to mention a quality that unfortunately there isn't a group, or should we say a community of Muslims, except that this has become dominant amongst them, except those whom Allah has had mercy from. And we'll talk about that. But this next quality is a quality that the Christians were well known for, that the Muslims unfortunately have fallen into. So it's very rare you find a country or a community of Muslims, like a society that is an Islamic society, except this criticizable action has a place in it. فمن يقرأ لنا؟ تفضل.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم اغفر لنا ولشيخنا ولوالدينا وللمستمعين. ثم قال الشيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية رحمه الله في كتابه اقتضاء us-Siraat-il-Mustaqeem وكثير من
وقال الله سبحانه قال الذين غلبوا
وقال الله تعالى قال الذين غلبوا على أمرهم لنتخذن عليهم مسجدا فكان الضالون بل ومغضوب عليهم يبنون المساجد على قبور الأنبياء والصالحين. وقد نهى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أمته عن ذلك في غير موطن، حتى في وقت مفارقته الدنيا بأبي هو وأمي. ثم إن هذا قد ابتلي به كثير من هذه الأمة. ثم إن الضالين تجد عامة عن
So the author, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, before we go any further, on your own reading, are there any kalimat there that are difficult for you? وقال الله سبحانه قال الذين غلبوا على أمرهم لنتخذن عليهم مسجدا فكان الضالون بل والمغضوب عليهم يبنون المساجد على قبور الأنبياء والصالحين وقد نهى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أمته عن ذلك في غير موطن حتى في وقت مفارقته الدنيا بأبيه هو وأمي ثم إن هذا قد ابتلي به كثير من هذه الأمة. موطن مكان من وطن, like you say the place that you're from is your watan, and when you put a word on that scale maf'al, it becomes the place or the time of doing it, just like masjid and matbakh and ma'had. So mawtan is the place of his iqama, right? So at the time here it's probably talking about the time of his residency, i.e. the time of his death. In different times and places. Ummati and dhalika fi ghayri mawtin, in different times and places. They call it ism zaman wa makan. Mufaraqa, same thing, it's just plural. Mafraqa in the plural, or mafraq in the plural will be mafaraqati. Ala wazni maf'al. Nah. فيكون اسم الزمان أو اسم مكان. It will be a word that represents the place of doing that action or the time of doing that action. So like when we say madhab, right, this is the madhab of Abi Hanifa, this is the madhab of Imam Ahmed, it is the place that they went to with their opinion. Masjid, the place where we make sujood, right? Mawtin can be the time that we were there or the place that we were at. They call that ism, zaman, wa makan, maf'al, and sometimes it can be maf'il. طيب. The author, he says, وقال سبحانه, Allah subhanahu, he says, وقال الذين غلبوا على أمرهم لنتخذن عليهم مسجدا. Those who were in charge of their affair. Right? This is referring to those futyan, those young boys that left the religion of their people. In the story of the people of the cave, Allah says that after He brought them back to consciousness and the people found them and they were aware of their story, and then those young men died thereafter, the people who were in charge of that area and in charge of that land and in charge of that, managing that sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, قال الذين غلبوا على أمرهم, those who had the dominance over their affair, لنتخذن عليهم مسجدا. They said, we're going to build over their graves a masjid. After they came back and then they died shortly thereafter, those people who were in charge said, we're going to build a grave over their masjid. And this is a quality that is common amongst the people of the book. A masjid over the graves of their prophets and righteous people. Or, even more likely the case, their irrighteous people. Right? Anybody who reaches a level of prestige amongst them and concern, the first thing they do is they build a temple. A place to worship where that individual is buried. The author, he says, فَكَانَ الضَّالُونَ. And so the people who are the ضَالُونَ, which were who? The Nasara. He says, so كَانَ الضَّالُونَ بَلْ وَالْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ. And the مَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ, who are the Yahud. Both of these groups, right? So far he's been talking about the qualities. This is a Jewish quality. This is a Christian quality, i.e. predominantly. But this quality right here is something that both groups do. And there's a secret in that. Just like how from this ummah, there are those that have a shabah with the Yahud. And from this ummah are those that have a shabah with the Nasara. Both of those groups have a shabah with them in this. So it's very rare that you find a group from the deviants, whether it be on this side, the mutafaqqiha, or the muta'abbida, the extremely scholastical innovators, if you will, or the extremely devout worshiping innovators, except that they all share in this. The taking of graves, whether you go from the Shia to the Sufi, whether you go to the Asha'ira, whether you go to whatever deviant group you find them, having a resemblance, because this is a quality that the Jews and the Christians both shared in. يَبْنُونَ الْمَسَاجِدَ عَلَى قُبُورِ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ وَالصَّالِحِينَ. They would erect or build the places of worship over on top of the graves of their prophets and righteous people. وَقَدْ نَهَى رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ أُمَّتَهُ عَنْ ذَلِكَ. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he forbade his ummah from doing this. Right? This was something the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam consistently forbade the people from. لَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ عَلَى الْيَهُودِ وَالنَّصَارَى اتَّخَذُوا قُبُورَ أَنْبِيَائِهِمْ مَسَاجِدَ. May the curse of Allah be upon the Jews and the Christians. They took the graves of their prophets as places of worship. لَا تَتَّخِذُوا قَبْرِ عِيدًا. Don't make my grave a celebration that you come back to every year or moment after moment. The Prophet consistently warned his ummah about this, to the extent that it is considered from the major sins. And this is from the things that make it so surprising that something the Prophet ﷺ gave so much concern to make sure we don't do, how much we all end up doing it. Not us individually, but as a Muslim ummah, right? You can't find many places except that grave worshiping is something that happens, whether on a governmental scale, where they build masajid and things like that, the Taj Mahal, the various shrines that they have for people, or on an individual scale. Like a person might say, well, alhamdulillah, in St. Louis, there's no masjids with graves in them. But how many people from the people in St. Louis go to the graveyard and worship? Right? From the citizens and the residents of St. Louis. In spite of it being something that the Prophet ﷺ warned against so much. And so this shows us that if he warned against it so much, and it's still as dominant as it is, it requires us to never give up on the warning against it. Sometimes you find people, they get exhausted or bored, وَيَعْذُ بِاللَّهِ, with the da'wah of imams like Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab and things of that nature. And they say, until when are we going to do this? Until when are we going to stop, talking about Tawheed, slaughtering to other than Allah, worshiping the graves? Until when, ya akhi? When are we going to move on past that? But this shows us here that this quality is something that the Prophet ﷺ never moved past. The Prophet ﷺ never moved past this in his call. He never stopped doing it. As the author says, في غير موت حتى في وقت مفارقته الدنيا. Even till the time when he was on his deathbed, the Prophet would go unconscious and he would come back to consciousness. And what was his statement when he would regain consciousness? لعنة الله على اليهود والنصارى اتخذوا قبور أنبيائهم مساجد. May the curse of Allah be upon the Jews and the Christians. They took the graves of their prophets as places of worship. So at what point in time did the Prophet move past calling to Tawheed? At what point in time did he stop warning the people from falling into grave worship, slaughtering to other than Allah, committing shirk? From the mistakes that people make. And even us sometimes, we say this statement without thinking about it. How long did the Prophet call to Tawheed? 10 years? He called to Tawheed for 10 years?
23 years.
The Prophet called to Tawheed for 23 years. Right? You find people making this statement. They say, well, the Prophet called to Tawheed for the 13 years when he was in Mecca. And then when he moved to Medina, that's when he started dealing with the legislation. The Prophet ﷺ called to Tawheed for 23 years. From the moment he began calling the people to Islam to the last thing he called the people to. What was it about? Tawheed. Another example. Look at the Quran. The way Allah had the Quran ordered. What was the first surah? What's it called to? Tawheed. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een. Rabbil alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim Malik. Well, all of the types of Tawheed are right there, right? What's the end of the Quran? قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس توحيد. Before that, قل أعوذ برب الفلق. Before that, قل هو الله أحد. Before that, تبت. Right? So the point is that the whole da'wah, from its beginning to its end, the da'wah itself, the Quran itself, the da'i, the Prophet ﷺ, from beginning to end, What did he call to the whole time? So when are we going to move past Tawheed? And in spite of how much he called to Tawheed, did the shaitan and the misguided groups, did they stop putting effort into taking people away from Tawheed? Did they give up taking people away from Tawheed? Or are they still putting effort into removing people from Tawheed? If they are still putting effort to remove people from Tawheed, how is it suitable for us to give up and stop putting effort to make sure people stay on Tawheed and come back to Tawheed? And if this is the case, that so many Muslims have fallen to this quality that the Prophet ﷺ spent the entirety of his life warning against, how can we think that one class in Tawheed is sufficient? We can move on. 5 years of Tawheed, this is sufficient. We can move on. So the author, he said that the Prophet ﷺ, he continued to call into this, into the last moments of his life when he was separating from the dunya. May my father and my mother be his ransom. وَهَذَا عِبَارَةٌ جَائِزَةٌ. This is a permissible statement to make, that I would give up my father and my mother in place of the Prophet ﷺ. Right? وهذا يعني فيه تحقيق لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى أكون أحب إليه من والده وولده والناس أجمعين. None of you have iman until I am more beloved to him than his parents and his children and all of mankind. Right? And this is a mi'yar or mizan, a scale in which you can weigh yourself. Because it's easy to say, may my mother and my father be his ransom. And how many Muslims say a statement like this? But how do you know when you're sincere in that claim? How can you tell when your statement, may my mother and my father be his ransom? When your statement, I love Allah more than my parents and my children. How can you tell when you're sincere in that claim?
It comes to something that's between your parents and Allah, who you're going to...
Exactly. By following him and by who you choose one over the other. How many people claim, and they get mad at us. They get mad at the one who tries to follow the Quran and the Sunnah. Why don't you celebrate the birthday? Why don't you do this or why don't you do that? Don't you love the Prophet? None of you have iman until you love him more than your parents and your children. When it comes to following the Prophet, من أقرب الناس في اتباع. Who are the people that are closer in following him? They have more love. They have more right to claim love. When it comes to making a decision, those same people who might criticize us for not engaging in innovation, when they're presented with the innovation that they're on and how it goes against the messenger, what is one of their common claims? What's one of the common claims that we've dealt with, we deal with consistently? إِنَّا وَجَدْنَا آبَاءَنَا عَلَى أُمَّةٍ. We found our parents doing this. We found the elders were doing this. The last generation, my dad used to do this. He was an imam down back home. My grandfather, he used to do this. If your mother and your father are going to be the ransom for the messenger, if you love the messenger more than you love your parents and your children, it requires you to put him above them. لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يكون هواه تبعا لما جئت به. None of you have iman until his desires are secondary to that which I came with. Now, the author, he goes on to say, now, so this is one of the qualities that both the Jews and the Christians erred in, that a lot of the Muslims fall into. أعاذنا الله وإياكم منها. طيب, اقرأ.
ثم إن الضالين تجد عامة دينهم إنما يقوم بأصوات مطربة والصور الجميلة فلا يهتمون بأمر دينهم بأكثر من تلحين الأصوات. ثم تجد قد ابتليت هذه الأمة من اتخاذ السماع المطرب بسماع القصائد وإصلاح القلوب والأحوال به ما فيه مضاهاة لبعض حال الضالين. وقال سبحانه وقالت اليهود ليست النصارى على
SubhanAllah. This is why I love this book. First, any questions about any of the kalimat? تفضل.
طيب.
مضطرب. طرب.
القصر.
أيوة. فالصوت المطرب is the one that gets you. Right.
رابين.
مو rapping بس يعني أي صوت any sound that gets your body moving, gets you in the groove. هذا الطرب. Right. So the sound that makes you do this is a sound that is مطرب or مطربة. And it could be مضطرب as well. But that's مطرب or مطرب. It could be either one.
أنا قرأت المضطرب.
ها؟
أنا قرأت المضطرب.
Yeah, مضطرب أيوة. هكذا كتبته.
And what is that action?
The thing that gets you moving, that gets you, grooving and dancing on the floor, right? Yeah. Whatever it might be, it might not be music, right? Sometimes it's not music, because when you think of music, what is music? And we'll talk about it, but it could be anything that gets you like that. Because look at the words that the author is going to say, tilhin al-aswat.
Is that a phenomenon or what?
So we'll explain it right now. But anybody have any more words? ثم إن الضالين تجد عامة دينهم إنما يقوم بالأصوات المضطربة والصور الجميلة فلا يهتمون بأمر دينهم بأكثر من تلحين الأصوات. ثم تجد قد ابتليت هذه الأمة من اتخاذ السماع المطرب بسماع القصائد وإصلاح القلوب والأحوال به ما فيه مضاهاة لبعض حال الضالين. The author, he says, and this is a quality, like, without a doubt, from us are those that have a shabah with the Yahud, right? And that shabah with the Yahud, you see a lot of those qualities are like transgressive qualities, jealousy, concealing, right? They're qualities that are transcendent, right? As it relates to the qualities of the Nasara, you see that a lot of these qualities are non-transcendent. They're about how a person deals with themselves, right? And you'll see the connection in the relationship when you see these things. The author, he says, and then from the Dhaleen, you find that the majority of their religion is nothing other than, what's the translation for this word? Yani, let's get a translation for this word. أنا بترجمة طيبة. Not emotion. Enchanting. Yeah, like things melodious. Like the majority of their religion is nothing more than these invigorating sounds, these enchanting sounds, these melodious sounds. MashaAllah, most of you all have never experienced that type of jahiliyyah. But those of you who have, you know that the majority, if not all of their religion is nothing more than sound. They go to church and all they care about is the choir, the organ, the singing, the preacher. Even in the way that they talk, they have to talk in a melodious way and in a singing type of way. Their religion is nothing more than that. My mother has been a Christian for the entirety of her life, and this is all they care about, right? All they care about is the song and the dance. وَالصُّوَرِ الْجَمِيلَةِ, beautiful images, right? The Prophet ﷺ, he warned us against tashyid al-masajid, extremely decorating the masajid, beautifying the masajid. But you look at them and their religion is nothing more than these sounds. And how can we make this cathedral? Look at the Sistine Chapel. Look at this picture. Look at this stained glass window. Look at this false god. In spite of the fact that from the foundations of their religion is what? Your Lord thy God is a jealous God that shall have no other gods before me. Don't take graven images. Right? But you find them that the majority of their religion is nothing more than these sounds and these shapes. Sounds and shapes, no essence. لا يهتمون بأمر دينهم بأكثر من تلحين الأصوات. They don't care anything more about their religion more than the fluctuations and the inflections in their voices, making it sound good. The preacher, he doesn't know. How many of their preachers don't know anything? But he says something. Look, I mean, wallahi, you can't go, if you have history, like knowledge of this, Jimmy Stewart, all of these preachers and people that they used to propagate and build up, how many of them are ignorant? They don't know anything about their religion. The smallest ayat in their book. وَهُمْ جُهَالٌ. But the sounds that they make, the music, Kirk Franklin, Stomp, everything is on this level in their religion. That's them. And then you come to the Muslim. Have any Muslims fallen into this? He says, and then you find that a large number of this ummah has been affected by this, where all they do is listen to these delightful sounds. Yes, we have from amongst us those who listen to music, right? Those who just all day long, Habibi, right? Every restaurant you go to, music has to be playing. They can't just sit there. It has to be music. It's a Muslim restaurant, but it has to have music. Everywhere you go, their cars, their homes, their children, their TV shows, the commercial break, everything, it has to have music. We can't just be without music. If we don't have music, it's as if we're not alive. That's how you find some people acting. You do any musiqa, it's as if they're dead. Why is it so dead in here? Why is it so quiet? Now turn on the music, right? Let's liven the place up. Let's get everything alive. But that's music. He's not even talking about music right here. بِسَمَاءِ الْقَصَائِدِ. By listening to an abundance of poetry. Right? You find that the good one from amongst us, oh no, akhi, music is haram. But all in his car is what? Anashid. Oh, right? Everything. Nasheed. Akhi, nasheed is halal. Everything. Right? Qasaid. But they just make, and they mix up the fact that, yes, nasheed in its essence might be halal. But when you start inflecting your voices and changing your voices to make music with your mouth, right? Like one of the poets in America used to do in the days past, he would make music with his mouth. Either just as bad as music with the table, music with the guitar. And this is what they do with nasheed. They make music with their mouth. And so the Muslims, you find them having this, an abundance of listening to these qasaid. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that you fill your belly with blood and pus is better than that you fill it with poetry. That if one of you were to fill himself with pus and vomit, it would be better than filling it up with poetry. Because these things distract. These things distract from what? From the remembrance of Allah. Music only produces two emotions: energy or depression. Music only produces two emotions: energy or depression. Huh? Think about if you ever listen to music. What other emotion did you feel from it? It produces energy, it gets you alive and ready to go. I need my workout song. This is going to get me ready before the game. Right? This is what I listen to get going. Or it makes you sad. Right? The love that you lost, your parent died, I miss you, I'm talking to you, right? It produces. But the Quran, look at the range of emotions that it produces in the individual. Right? Contemplation, reflection, sadness, fear, hope, love, right? So the Quran is that which we benefit from. But this music, they say it's Quran al-Shaytan. It's the Quran of the Shaytan. And so you find a lot of Muslims nowadays, they become engrossed in listening to this abundance of poetry. And they use that as the means, وَإِصْلَاحِ الْقُلُوبِ وَالْأَحْوَالُ بِهِ. And they use that as how they try to rectify their hearts and their circumstances. Maybe a generation ago, it came out that thing, Christian rap. Christian, right? Everything had to be Christian this, Christian that. And not too long after it, you found the Muslims doing what? Muslim rap. We're going to get to the youth by bringing them Muslim rap and Muslim poetry, jams and slams, and, you know, where is this from the Sharia? Yes, it's okay to make poetry. It's speech. It's good as good, it's bad as bad. But to fill yourself with it, till there's no room for anything else, فَهَذَا مَذْمُومٌ. And to think that that is going to be the key to your rectification and to your betterment over busying yourself with the Quran, فَمَنْ ظُنَّ هَذَا فَقَدْ أَبْعَدَ النَّجَاةَ. Whoever thinks that, then he has completely missed the mark.
Sure.
No.
Sorry to interrupt, but before we move on, I know whatever you do, like, you know, go beyond limits, that's not good, but you said the music that you make with your voice.
With your mouth, yeah. Or with cats or with tables. Yeah. So this is what they call, in English, the word for this is called drops, right? You know what a drop is? A drop is when you use a sound that originally is not music. A cat going meow, right? A cat going meow, permissible, impermissible? It's permissible. It's a cat meow, permissible, impermissible? You going meow, permissible, impermissible? Like, meow. Meow, 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 meow. Permissible, impermissible. So, this is the way that they arrive at the judgment that this is impermissible is a technique that is called qiyas al-shabah, a qiyas of comparison. You have this reality that is between two things. It's between a cat or you or whatever going meow. That is, what's the ruling of that? A cat going meow or you going meow. What's the ruling of that? It's permissible. And this other reality of music. What is the ruling of that? Haram. So when I take this sound and fashion it in this shape, it now has a combination of these two realities. Which one is it more like? And whichever one it's more like, that's the ruling you give it. And if you can't determine which one it's more like, then you err on the side of impermissibility, right? So if I just go meow, 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 permissible or impermissible? I'm playing with my daughter, and I go meow, meow, hey mama, meow, 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 meow. Is that permissible or impermissible? I'm just making sounds. There's no guitar, there's no oud, there's no drum. I'm just making dumb sounds to appease my daughter, to make happiness in her heart. And if I take a drum and I go, what am I doing? Haram. There's no question about that, right? سيأتي في آخر الزمان, it will come in the last days, a group of people who make permissible al-harra wal-harir, silk and intercourse, and alcohol and musical instruments. When I'm using this musical instrument, there's no question that it's haram. But now I have the combination of this sound that I was just playing with my daughter, but I'm going to use it in a musical fashion. I need to make a decision. It has both elements. Which one does it resemble more? Right? If I go, oh no, how they used to do it. What is that? Oh, I have that. The shabah of that is closer to music than it is to, right? The resemblance of is closer to music than it is to good job, Akhi, right? Right? So this qiyas al-shaba is what makes those things that their foundation might be permissible, but when they started to resemble this, they became haram. And there are other examples of that when we start talking about things that you can't decipher. Like, for example, horses, permissible or impermissible to eat? Horses are permissible. Donkeys, permissible or impermissible to eat? Impermissible, right? Donkeys, domesticated donkeys, impermissible. A mule, what is a mule? It's a combination of a horse and a donkey. Permissible or impermissible? To eat. Horses are permissible. Donkeys are impermissible. I now have a mule. Which one is it? Is it permissible or impermissible? Huh?
It's not permissible to make.
Why not?
To make a mule.
Why not? The Prophet had a mule, a bugger.
To make a mule.
I can't stop a donkey and a horse from doing what they do. What I'm supposed to do? Stand there like, haram, you need to get married first? I don't know. If you have an ethel that's saying it's haram to make them, I don't know. But I know that they exist.
So you're erring on the side of impermissible because you're not sure.
It's not even erroring. It is absolutely impermissible. Why? Because we're not sure which one is most like. And we know haram is there. You have clean water and dirty water, right? But you can't tell the difference. What do? You make tayammum. You see what I'm saying? So the point of it is that when you ask about this music with your mouth, like Bismarck, people make music with their mouth that is just like the musical instrument, right? Like experts. Are we going to say that this is not haram because they don't have a cord or because they don't have a leather skin over an open bottom? It's just as haram. And if they use a sound that is not music, but they use it to make it music, then what did they do that for? The people who do the nasheed, where they're singing and they're making, they have the tenors and the sopranos and the baritones. Why are they doing all of that?
To make a melody.
To make it music. Otherwise, we could just say, Ya-Sa'ili, and we could just say it, right? Abda'u bismillahi rabbiyal ahad. But when they add all of that extra stuff in there, it's to make it music. And it's not just about it being catchy or melodious. It's about, when you look at it, you know they were trying to make music, the halal music, right? And they call it these things, halal music. Halal this, halal that, just to get you to do what? And like you say, in moderation, poetry is okay. There's not a scholar from the scholars that said that he memorized some poetry. But the prohibition is that when you are full of it, to where there's no room for anything else. You can't memorize hadith because you're too busy with nasheed. You can't memorize Quran because you're too busy with nasheed. Everything is nasheed and there's no time for Allah and His Messenger. Then this is the prohibition. The author, he says, and they use this to try to rectify their hearts and their circumstances. Right? And this is ridiculous. How could this poetry fix your outward circumstances? Right? You could see somebody being misled to think that the poetry will make them better, a better person, because of how it affects them. Right? We say it invigorates or it makes them sad. But how could this poetry fix the community? How could this poetry fix the society? But you find them doing it. They'll have a big hafla. They'll have a big poetry jam and let's invite everybody. Or just recently, one of the American poets had a big gathering where he brought faction and gang members together. And they think that this is going to turn society around. Ya Shabab, be careful running in and out of that. Open the door. Don't run in and out of it from the backside. They think that this is going to be the thing that brings the society together. A rap song. And that's going to make us all brothers in the religion, or all brothers in the streets. Hayhat. Right? The only thing that's going to unite the people is what Allah told us about. Right? وَلَوْ أَنْفَقْتَ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ مَا أَلَّفْتَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِهِمْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ أَلَّفَ بَيْنَهُم. If you was to spend what is in the skies and the earth, you wouldn't never gather between their hearts. But Allah gathers between their hearts. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا. Hold fast to the rope of Allah all together. The author, he says, مَا فِيهِ مُضَاهَةٌ لِبَعْضِ أَهَلِ الظَّالِينَ. This quality of music and poetry and nasheed and instruments and sounds and images, right? Muslims don't want to go to a masjid unless it's decorated. And look how nice. You see the YouTube channels. The most expensive masjid in America, $1.7 million. Look at how great our masjid is. The wood mahogany floors and the gold chandeliers by itself cost $25,000. What is this? But there's no religion. You go to them, you ask them, where's Allah? They say, fi kulli makan. Right? Because they don't care about their religion except images. Well, when the kafirs come and see it, look how nice it looks. And sounds. We want the qadi who's really good. Even they do it with the Quran. We want that qadi like Abdul Basit. Right? It doesn't matter if his rules and regulations are right or wrong. This is the one that the people, Allah. Right? Allah musta'an.
So, to what extent then should we decorate the masjid?
Not at all. Should not decorate the masjid at all. Wallahi, this is not a museum. Right? What is the decoration of the masjid? What makes the masjid like, ooh, that's a good masjid? What makes the masjid like that? إِنَّمَا يَعْمُرُ مَسَاجِدَ اللَّهِ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ. Those who establish the masjid, who build the masjid, are those that have faith in Allah. When I leave after the salah and I hear subhanallah, 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 like the buzzing of bees, I say, oh, that's a good masjid. When I line up and the people are foot to foot, shoulder to shoulder, I say, Allahu Akbar, that's a good masjid. When I can see the Prophet's sunnah being implemented in the masjid, I say, man, that's a nice masjid. And it doesn't matter if it was man bana lillahi masjidan kamafhasi qafa, right? The size of where a pigeon digs its hole. The Prophet's masjid, how was it? Roof of date palm. Half of the ground mud when it rains. Half of the masjid uncovered above, right? What's the best masjid you can think of after the haram? What's the prettiest, the most best masjid you can think of after the Kaaba? Masjid al-Nabawi. And this is how it was. Like, those conversations are conversations on levels in culture. There are some things that are impermissible to put in the masjid, right? You look at this masjid, alhamdulillah, you don't see ayat written all over the walls. You don't see Allah, Muhammad on the front of the minbar, right? What are these things for? Right? Allah, Muhammad, la ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, where is that at in this masjid? This is a true question. Where is la ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah at in this masjid? It's inside of, that's right. Abu got it. He got it right here. La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. Right? You don't have to put it on the wall because I have it with me. Like when you hang those du'as on in the front of the bathroom or in your bedroom or in your car, why do you hang it there? Right? To remember, right? Or to teach a child who doesn't know. It's like, I don't need that La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah on top of the minbar. I remember. And I make sure that I'm focused on. I make sure that everybody else here remembers. How do I make sure everybody else here remembers Muhammad Rasulullah? I see somebody doing some akhi, Muhammad Rasulullah said, don't do this. Right? So the point is that the author is saying that the Muslims who have fallen into this, فِيهِمْ مُضَاهَاء لِبَعْضِ حَالِ الضَّالِينَ. They have this competition. And this is it. This is really what it is. It's this mubaha with the kuffar. Huh? Tafakhur, but not even just for the sake of tafakhur, not just to be proud, but like the kafirs are doing it, I got to keep up with them. I got to keep up with the Joneses. I got to do what they did. They just did this. I got to do it too. Otherwise, nobody's going to come down. If we don't have a gymnasium, what are we going to do about the youth? If our masjid doesn't have a gym, what's going to happen to our youth? We need an Islamic basketball team, right? To get the youth. We need an Islamic swimming pool. We need an Islamic, workout center. Is there anything wrong with a swimming pool? Is there anything wrong with the gymnasium? Is there anything wrong with putting a basket in a hoop? A ball in the basket? No. Not necessarily. But when did these things become Islamic? When did we have to put these things with the masjid? To where we got to keep up with them. If we don't have this or that and the third, then our masjid is deficient. We got to, so, fihim mubaha. They have this competition with, they did it, we need to do it. And you see it in some of the masajid. You see it in some of the people. They don't look and see what the sunnah said about this. They look at their neighbors. And where did the crescent moon and star symbol come from? You know where the crescent moon and the star symbol, where did it come from? It wasn't around during the time of the Prophet.
That would be to replace like the cross, Christians.
The Turks put it. Oh, we need something on our flags. They got a cross. We need something too. What we going to put? What are we going to use? We can't use the image of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? What are we going to use? A tamar? Right? That Turks. What are we going to use? Oh, the crescent moon. Every Muslim looks up for the crescent moon. So when we put the flag, they look up, see the crescent moon, they know it's us. Why do all these masajid have qubba, domes on them? When Sheikh Abdul Rahman was here, we're driving down Grand, and he looked like, man, from a distance, I thought it was a masjid. Right? Why did he think it was a masjid? The water tower, for example. Or all the churches we had. Why do you think they were masjids?
Oh, because of like a minaret?
Because the domes and the minaret, and just the domes on the Catholicism, their churches have all these what?
Well, you said you were going down Grand. So
right. There's churches and then the water tower there as well. But it's because there's a dome on top of it. Right? It looks like. But the question is, did they get that from the Muslims or did the Muslims get that from them? Like, where did the qubba come from? Was that us, and then they took it? Or was it them, and then we took it? We took it from them, right? So these are things that you find us, we start this mubaha, this trying to compete with them. Instead of being unique in our Islamic identity.
Historically, is that true?
What, the qubba didn't come from us?
I mean, the dome or whatever, it's not.
That's not from us. The Prophet actually didn't have a dome. The Sahaba didn't build domes, right? You said, well, what about the dome of the rock, right?
I'm saying, is it possible the Christians built it after we did?
As far as I know, the domes came from them. The qubba is something that you find most Muslim scholars not being in appreciation of. But here, it doesn't hurt. But we might not be doing it because of them, right? That's what you about to say?
Yeah, I mean, like if it helps somebody find the masjid.
No, architecturally,
it's a science. It's easy to see.
No, architecturally, it's a better design.
Especially nowadays, I mean, they don't do it as much, even if
architecturally it's better than a flat roof.
That's the statement. Even if we didn't do it to be like them, the fact that they do it, we got to be different. That's what this book is about.
But they don't do it nowadays, though.
They don't build their churches like that?
Not most of them.
Maybe not the poor ones here. But, I mean, I don't know about Orthodox Ethiopian Christians, African in Egypt. I still see domes. And most of their churches here are old and classical. They don't need to build a new one. Yeah. Domes were built in ancient Mesopotamia. They have been found in Persian, Hellenistic, Roman, and Chinese architecture as well. The reason the Romans began using the dome is because they recognized the benefit of large spaces that were uninterrupted by columns, walls, or any other. Like, as far as I know, the dome came from them. Right? Why do you think there's so much criticism of the green dome on the Prophet's masjid? Right, the qubba, right? Not the qubba.
To my point, architecturally, it's better. It's a better. Maybe you ain't gonna use it.
If Ibn Taymiyyah mentions here, and this is why I love this book, because we're going to get into those weeds. Because all of us have something that we think is, well, I mean, come on, Akhido, but I mean, it's obvious. If anything they did was good, they would deserve a reward for it. If anything they did was good, they would deserve a reward for it. Do they get rewarded for anything they do? So everything they do is deficient, even in the matters of their deen. Now, am I saying it's haram to build a building that has a dome? I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that the Muslim needs to consider, what is the deficiency of what they did? Can I make it better? Can I make it Islamic somehow? Can I make it a better thing than just copying what they did? You see what I'm saying? Most of us, we don't look at it that deep. We say, well, they came up with this idea. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And then we just keep copying. Instead of looking to see, this is what they came up with. And they probably stole some of their ingenuity and their technology from us to begin with. But then we just gave up. Right? We'll use an example. The pee trap. Right? Akramakumullah, in the toilet, there's a pee trap where there's water in it. What did the Prophet forbid us from doing? The Prophet forbade us from urinating in still water. Has any Muslim plumber, engineer came up with a way, how can we prevent the gases and the odors while still having indoor plumbing without having to do it into water? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, you put the trap downstream from...
And I have no idea. That is not my purpose. That is not my expertise. But there should be some Muslim patent to say, look, all these caverns with their sitting toilets that cause you bad bodily functions and bad posture, where you're urinating and defecating into water, wasting water, doing exactly what the Prophet said don't do. We should come up with something that the Muslims can say, this is what we did to get around that. If you don't have the ability, then like Abu Ayyub said, we found their toilets built towards the Qibla. We would turn a little bit and we ask Allah to forgive us. And that's all we could do. We can't go and tear down all the toilets and rebuild them. But if we have the option, we should figure out what? A better way to do it. Instead of just copying them and say, well, the dome is the best thing. Right? What else can we do? Their school years, everything about them is deficient. Everything that I know it's from them, I don't want it. I want something different. And the things that I don't know if it's from them or not, but they have become the predominant, I want to be different. And there's balance, as we're going to see. The trench, whose idea was that? Who did he get it from? Persians. Right? He adopted that technology from them, but then they did it with what? Prophetic insight. Right? And so there's a balance there. It's not saying you can't, the information and the science that they use, we have to reject it and come up with our own science and our own information, because some things are universal. But are we just going to stop where they stopped because they did it and say that's good enough? From the time of Aristotle until now, how much have they changed? Every generation, they're changing over and over again. Are we going to just trust them that what they did is the best way without looking into it ourselves? But what was the thing we were talking about? Hukm al-Qubbah. That's what I wanted to see. Well, I'm almost certain the Romans did it first because Christianity was before. Yeah.
Romans did it after Mesopotamia.
He says, وَهُوَ لَا يَعْتَقِدُ فِي طَرِيقِهِمْ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ وَالْهُدَى شَيْئًا. And they don't believe that they have anything in their way of knowledge or guidance. They don't have any aspects of knowledge or guidance. And we see people like this, even from the Salafi. Right? How many of us, we go to a place and we see a person, mashallah, he prays his sunnahs, right? Decent Muslim, he prays his sunnahs, he gives salams, he smiles at you when he gives salams, he invites you to his house for food, and you still look at him like, this guy, he ain't about nothing, right? He's common Muslim, he's ignorant Muslim. We used to be like this, and we haven't been left, right? They think that what they're upon is nothing. They're establishing the salat. They're on Fajr every morning. But then somebody thinks that their way is nothing. He says, and vice versa. You see the people, a lot of the ones who are mutasawwifa, mutafakkira, those who are aesthetic and stay away from worldly affairs and matters, you find them considering the legislation and knowledge to be nothing. Right? They figure it's all about the relationship I have with Allah, my personal connection, how I interact and engage with Him. All of these laws are for you guys. That's for the common folk. But as far as me, I have a personal relationship with Allah. Like this they say. And so they consider the legislation to be nothing. And they find that the one who holds on to the legislation is somebody who is in reality cut off from Allah. Like the Sufis say, they say that the person who's following the Sharia, he doesn't understand the realities. He's cut off from Allah. He doesn't have the ilm ladunni. He doesn't have that personal knowledge about Allah. And he finds that the people don't have anything that will benefit them with Allah. But the correct approach is that what the book and the Sunnah has come with from this and this is necessary, basically, right? The Quran and the Sunnah, did it come with just knowledge? What kind of knowledge does the Quran and Sunnah encourage? No, what kind of knowledge does the Quran and Sunnah encourage? No. Beneficial knowledge. How do you know the knowledge is beneficial?
Either benefits your dunya or
generalities, those are decent statements. How do you know that knowledge is beneficial? You do it. Apples, beneficial or not? Apples, are they beneficial or not? They are only beneficial when what? When you eat it. You can have an apple all day long and talk to me about the vibrancy of its color and the smell and the greatness and the way it was shaped and formed, and look at the detailed precision, the way Allah created it and how good it works and the juices and how they flow, until you eat an apple. Did it help you? Knowledge is not beneficial until you do it. And you can't do the knowledge, you can't do the action until what? Until you have the knowledge. And so therefore you can't separate them. If you don't have beneficial actions, if you don't have actions, then your knowledge is not beneficial. And this is why you found that people used to be more inclined to Ibn Umar than they used to be to Ibn Abbas. Who was more knowledgeable per se between Ibn Umar and Ibn Abbas? They used to say Ibn Abbas was more knowledgeable. His nickname was Al-Habr, Al-Bahr, the ocean, the extreme scholar. But the people always wanted whose fatwa? Ibn Umar. Because they could see Ibn Umar's actions more than they could see Ibn Abbas's knowledge. Right? And the people are going to gravitate to what they can recognize. You don't ever pray sunnahs. You don't ever do this. You don't ever smile at your brothers. You're never this. You're never that. The people are going to gravitate to the one who does more of those things. And so for the Salafi, it's important that you have for yourself a portion of this worship to justify your knowledge. And they say that everything has a zakat. Everything that grows and increases has a zakat. And the zakat of knowledge is two: to teach and to act. And so the author is saying that the truth, the correct view, is that whatever the book and the sunnah came with of this and this, then it is the truth. You have to have knowledge and action. And people will have it different levels, but there has to be some combination, right? Imam Malik probably didn't worship as much in the conventional sense of the word as Fudayl ibn Iyad, Abid al-Haramain. But Abid al-Haramain didn't have as much knowledge as Imam Malik, for example. But both of them had what? Knowledge and action. Right? That's why when you get to somebody like a guy in between them, Ibn al-Mubarak, he combined both scholarship and action. Every year Hajj, every year jihad. Right? And these are the best ones. Ibn Taymiyyah, these are the ones who stick out. Knowledge and action. He says, وَمَا خَالَفَ الْكِتَابِ وَالسُّنَّةِ مِنْ هَذَا وَهَذَا بَاطِلٌ. And whatever opposes the book and the sunnah from this, i.e. from knowledge, just information for the sake of information, and action without information, then both of that is batil. Both of those are falsehoods. So the people who just get information and knowledge that doesn't benefit them, right? Like we see in some affairs like language. Some of the people like Arabic language, but they go so far in the Arabic language to what was a benefit doubles back as corruption and misguides them. Some people like to get into history, and history is a beneficial knowledge, but they double down in history so much that it comes back and it harms them, right? Because they got so engrossed in history that you find them not protecting their tongues from the Salaf, having these opinions about people, right? Because they start getting a familiar, where the Salaf would tell you, for example, how do we approach the historical period of what happened amongst the Sahaba? Do we seek out that knowledge about what Shajara Bain Sahaba? Do we seek out that knowledge? Do we say we need to have a class about what happened between Ali and Muawiyah? That's
Find balance.
right. Do we seek out that knowledge? Do we go and look for it? Do we say, let's have a dawah about what happened between Ali and Muawiyah, and let's talk about both sides, and let's figure out who was right, who was wrong, what was good, what was bad, who did good, who did bad? Have you ever seen a class like that? It's a knowledge that we have it. It's not like we don't have the knowledge, but we have that, like you mentioned, that balance. It's not something that we go and get an abundance of. Because there's a limit to the knowledge that we should get. Allah, subhanAllah. And I'm going to stop with this. Just think of the duality of this reality. What's the one thing Allah told the Prophet ﷺ to ask for more of? وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. And in spite of that, Allah put a limit on the types of knowledge that you should try to seek. Even in things that you would think would be beneficial. Things that you would think would be good, Allah told you don't try to get it. Like what? What's something that is the greatest thing that Allah told you not to try to get that knowledge? تَفَكَّرُوا فِي خَلْقِ اللَّهِ وَلَا تُفَكِّرُوا فِي ذَاتِ اللَّهِ. Think about Allah's creation. Don't think about Allah. Allah's the greatest thing. Allah made it haram for you to try to get what? Information about who He is. Like that. The how He is. It's haram for you to think about كيف Allah. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ. It's haram for you to do what? Try to figure out the reality. قُلْ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي. You can't get that information. You see what I'm saying? So in spite of the fact that Allah encouraged us to want more knowledge, He put a limit on the types of things that we should know. So sometimes there is knowledge that you shouldn't be trying to get. Even in things that seem good, let alone when we start talking about magic and music and things like this. Obviously, these are haram knowledges to begin with. And likewise, there are actions that we can't do. Even actions that seem good. What's the best action? The greatest action that one of us can do? Salah. But you can't pray after Fajr. You can't pray after Asr. You can't pray when the sun is at its uppermost. What's another great action? Siyam. But a woman can't fast while she's on her period. She can't pray while she's on her period. We can't fast on the Eid. Allah made it haram for us to do these great actions at this time. So there's that balance between there's knowledge that we should get and knowledge that we shouldn't get. Even in things that are the same. I need to know Tawheed, but there's a limit to how much about Allah I should be trying to figure out. Actions, I need to make salah, but there's a limit to how I can make salah. And so that the author is saying here that there is whatever the book came from this and that, then that is the truth. And whatever the book and the sunnah, whatever was opposed to the book and the sunnah, from knowledge and from action, then it is falsehood. And this is a quality that you find those two extreme groups not necessarily recognizing. We'll stop there. Next time, the author is going to talk about some of the things that the Persians and the Romans did that you find us resembling them in. And we'll continue from that, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.